It's the Experience Action Podcast, and it's my favorite episode of the month. It is time for CX Pulse Check. For this CS Pulse Check, we are in the middle of the summer. A lot of things are heating up, and I cannot wait to talk about it with our special co-host. It is my absolute pleasure to introduce you all to Marcus Story from Delaware North. Marcus, thank you so much for being here, and I would love for our audience to know a little bit about you.
Well, first and foremost, thank you, Jeannie, for having me here. As you said, my name is Marcus Story. I am the Corporate Director of Customer Experience and Social Customer Care for Delaware North. My team really focuses on helping the company to create and then implement their CX strategy across our different business lines, as well as we are the voice of the organization across our different social platforms across the globe. So get to dilly and dally into a lot of different businesses.
And I bet that a lot of people may not know what Delaware North does. So I would love for you to share a little bit about that, because I think it's one of those names that doesn't really describe who you all are.
Yeah, that's a question that comes up all the time. Even with my friends, I typically tell people, you may not know who Delaware North is, but chances are you've done business with us. Mm-hmm. We serve roughly 500 million customers a year across North America. Some locations down in APAC and then in the UK. But some of our most notable clients would be Kennedy Space Center Visitors Complex down in Florida, maybe your local baseball team, maybe one of those restaurants or retail stores that you picked up something on through your journey through the airport. But whether it's here, there, or even Disney, we're typically there taking care of you.
Yeah, it's a very interesting model. We've had the pleasure of working together for a little while now. And I think what's so fascinating about it is like you mentioned, it could be in a baseball stadium, you could be at an airport, and it's all about really serving the people who are coming through those retail stores, coming through certain fast casual restaurants, different places like that. And it's really about delivering on the experience. So it's a tall order, but you do it well. And I think you have the perfect name too for what you do with your last name Story, because a lot of it is really, we want to understand the story of our customers. We want to make sure we're using storytelling effectively as customer experience leaders and all of those things. So I know I've asked you to do this for a while. It took us a while to get scheduled. So I'm thrilled that you're here with me, Marcus. And I can't wait to hear what you have to say about some of the things I picked out, because we talk a lot about travel and hospitality and all of those things. And right now we're in July of 2025 now, and travel is hot topic again, because, there are things happening with weather. They're also expecting peak numbers, even for some of the upcoming weeks ahead of us. And I know that my experience traveling, there's just been a lot lately. And you travel a lot too, so I know you can relate to this.
It's not a pleasant experience some days.
It's not. And I think that part of what I'm seeing, and we'll talk about this too, but part of what I'm seeing is that there's kind of this rush around automation. Like, we all want to use automation in all the different ways we can. And I mean, I'm saying this, and as a business owner, I've said those words. I've said like, we need to automate more and get all excited about it. But when you are stuck as a traveler, that is like the last thing that you want.
You want to talk to a person.
You want to talk to a person. And I think that part of what is so challenging about all of this is we create these experiences around kind of the ideal experience, and then stuff happens, like weather happens or whatever. And it's not that simple. You have to recently, I ended up, instead of flying from Phoenix to California, I had to go to Seattle to California. And on the way home, the same thing happened with my connection. And so I ended up taking a 2-hour Uber to San Francisco and flying home that way. So that's not something you can just put into a chat, right? And I also think that there's this big move around customer experience specifically for airlines. Like, we've heard a lot around Delta. United has announced that they're starting to go towards free Wi-Fi and some of those things. And then the first story I wanted to talk about with you today was about American Airlines, who just announced some new members of what they're calling the new Customer Experience Advisory Board, but really it's an extension of their Operations Excellence Board. So the headline is American Airlines names members of new customer experience advisory board. This was in the news, but I actually pulled this from the American site, their newsroom, to make sure I got that right. And a couple things stood out to me about this. One is, again, it's an extension of something that's really about internal operations. And they invited some experts, but they're people who are former CEOs of a resort organization. There's somebody around the Walt Disney Company, folks like that. But I didn't see any mention of listening to customers. I didn't see any mention of bringing customers in, and that really struck me. So I'm just curious, what do you think about this as from your position?
Yeah, we clearly think alike, because when I was reading through the article, I think I've told you in the past, I did some work for a period of time with a power company, and even at the work that we do at Delaware North, like, it's very, very important to talk to your customers. So when I first read it, my mind immediately went, oh, great, American set up a customer advisory board. And then I went back and read, I said, wait, this is a customer experience advisory board for the operators. So, kudos to them. Mm-hmm. I think anyone who, as you said, you travel a lot, I travel a lot. I'm a United guy, just put that out there. But, I'm also a bit of an aviation geek. So I read a lot of the news, and American has consistently kind of fallen to the bottom of the top three airlines, Delta, mm-hmm. United, and American. And they need to focus on the experience if they want to win back those corporate travelers, which is a lot of their bread and butter. So kudos for moving in the right direction. But I think if they're really interested in understanding what needs to be done to improve the product, improve the service, then you need to bring some customers into that board so that you can hear, what are they liking, what are they disliking, what are the pain points. Mm-hmm. As you said, we've worked together on a couple journey mapping projects, and in many ways that might be some of the exercises they need to do. So yep. American, reach out to Jeannie.
I love it. Yeah. And I actually have been an American frequent flyer for the last several years. And part of it was because when I started really flying more than a decade ago regularly, United was kind of losing a step back then. And so I went to American because I'm based in Chicago, and they both have big hubs there. And now I feel like I'm kind of looking over at Terminal 1. And, I'm participating in their little status match challenge. So I'm actually flying United a few times just to kind of see and compare the experience and to see if what they offer. And I will say, like, there is a difference in the planes. It feels like the planes are more modern and newer and things like that, at least from my experience so far. And there are a few other differences that I think are interesting. So I will be watching this carefully, because I'm really, for the first time in a long time, I'm kind of actively shopping as an airline passenger, because once you get into, like you said, oh, I'm a United guy, because once you're in it, that's kind of just
to get out.
It's the knee jerk, right? Like, you're just like, okay, well, that's what I'm booking. And then it becomes this whole cycle of, well, I need to do this for my miles and my loyalty points and all that stuff. So I think that there are some really interesting things happening in the space right now. But I agree, American has to step up a little bit here. They have to really figure out what can they do to attract those corporate flyers, as well as just build that reputation again. Really, I think it's about credibility and reputation as well. So I'll be watching this, but I agree.
I was going to say, I think one of the most interesting things about United's turnaround that many people don't recognize is their CEO, Scott Kirby, was the number 2 at American. Like, he left American to go to United, and first thing he did, if you go back and look at some of his old articles, was he said, we're putting the customer first. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I think that's an interesting tidbit between the two.
It is. Well, and I think everybody's been watching too the big changes that Ed Bastian at Delta has made, because he was really one of the first ones to say, you know what, some of this just doesn't make sense for the customer, so let's stop doing it. Like the free Wi-Fi thing. I mean, that was revolutionary at the time, because they make so much off those fees that everybody thought he was crazy. But when he did it, he also did that to build their loyalty program, and it worked. And so it looks like United is about to take that step as well and do it in a very similar way. So I think that there they're all watching each other, but for some reason, I feel like American is like running a little behind, like keeping up
They'll
with
get there. They don't have a choice to. But no, you're right. Ed at Delta, I shared it with some leaders too, an article on him on how he turned Delta around and his meticulous focus on some of the most, probably if you're in finance, probably mundane tasks like baggage delivery. He was like, before we give people access to a baggage tracker, we have to make sure that every bag is scanned and delivered within 20 minutes, and worked meticulously at some of the smallest details. But the devil's in the details.
Yeah.
At least for your customer, the devil's in the details. If the bag doesn't show up, you've ruined my entire journey.
Well, and I think that's a great point, that sometimes we want to offer the bells and whistles first. But if we do that without actually just making sure that the stuff works the way people expect it to work, like that doesn't do anybody any good. So making sure that you are really understanding what is happening for the customer, what is their perception, how do they actually get through it? It's just so easy not to do that. It's so easy to sit in our processes and our procedures and our assumptions and then say, well, no, look, we've got the shiny new app, but you need to get the stuff right first. So that's a really good point. And so this next one is really more about hospitality, but I think it applies across the board to a lot of different industries right now. I feel like we cannot have a conversation about customer experience without saying AI, like within 30 minutes, because some alarm goes off or something. But this is from Hotel Dive, and it's an opinion piece, but the headline is how AI-powered CX strategies can better meet guest expectations. And it's really about how hospitality brands are leaning into using AI. And again, you travel a lot, but you also have a lot of expertise in hospitality just based on what you do. So what were some of the things that stood out to you, or some of the questions you have about this?
Yeah, so I think, I started my career in the hotel business, so running some different properties here and there. There's two things I really appreciated about the article. I think he's spot on about personalization. Like that is where the experience has moved to. That is what our customers expect, is they want something that's unique and personal to them. So we should be able to leverage AI. I mean, at least I'm on my phone all the time. So if it's my birthday and I fly you every week, or I go buy a coffee, at least send me a happy birthday notification. But it's also taking it to that next step and recognizing, and I think this is, as he was kind of, leaning towards, is where AI is going to go. But if you're a business traveler and you stay in the same hotel every week, and, back in the day, it was the front desk agent knew that you liked room 201 at the end of the hall, away from the elevator. But the AI could be mining that data and say, hey, let's automatically put him in 201 every time he books, if it's available. Or if you only sit in the window seat, but when you go book your ticket, a window seat isn't available. How do we move Jeannie to that window seat so that, as long as she's not traveling with someone else, she's in that space that she likes. The second most important thing, and I preach this at work, I think I just preach this in my life in general, is that in the hospitality industry, we're delivering service. And service still requires that human connection. And I know people are like, oh, well, people love doing things on their own. They love doing simple tasks on their own. But at the end of the day, they still want to be cared for. And we can't lose the human touch, that human connection in the hospitality business. So I think, like you said, leverage AI where it makes sense. Leverage AI where it can empower our team members to deliver great service. Leverage AI to remove some of those mundane tasks so that you can focus on the guests in front of you. But you have to keep the human connection.
I totally agree. I totally agree. And it's also, I think, there are all these studies coming out right now about how, because people are getting more isolated in their kind of daily lives, we actually need to see strangers sometimes. We need to interact. There was a grocery store, and I believe it was in the Netherlands, and they were trying to speed up everything all the time, right? Like self-service and making sure people were very efficient and their cashiers were very efficient. And they had some mostly elderly customers who would show up and want to chat with the cashier. And they would annoy the rest of the people in line, but that was like a really meaningful moment in their day. So this grocery store actually created a line just for that, for like, hey, if you want a conversation, stand in this line. And people do it and they are loyal about it. And so I also wonder about that, because sometimes you have those long travel days and sometimes it's really nice just to have somebody say, hey, welcome, right? Like those little moments, I don't think we should overlook those as part of the experience, because yes, it's easy to check in on your app and use your digital key and not talk to anybody. But I think that there's something really valuable about making sure, even if somebody's doing that, if they're walking in and we know they're walking in because AI is telling us that, is there a way that we can say like, hey, we're glad you're here, or here's that, here's that snack that you like, or whatever. Years and years and years ago, I used to have this horrible trip where I went to a small town in Kansas, and then I would have to drive at like 11 o'clock at night and get to Tulsa. And I always stayed at the DoubleTree, and there was no room service or anything, and there was no Uber Eats back then. And so, but the guy there, after I went a couple months, he would start saving me one of their cookies. Very small thing, but it meant so much, because I would show up at like 1 o'clock in the morning, exhausted, and he would say, oh, I saved this for you. And it's just those little moments. I'm talking about that, 15 years later or whatever. So I think that that's another thing that we have to look at as the balance between, yes, we can automate, we can use AI, and AI, I think, can sometimes provide that empathy and compassion when it's done the right way. But that human connection is not just about when things go wrong. It's about those moments that we have that are just meaningful and help us feel human in that moment as well. So it's all interesting. Who knows what's going to happen when we check into a hotel in like 5 years?
I hope there's still, I think you should have the option if you want to, just grab your app and go. But,
yeah.
One of the things that we teach a lot of our team members is that, and there's a lot of research on it, but humans like to hear their name. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if AI is ever going to be able to replace the soul and warmth of a human. Using that DoubleTree example where you go every week or every couple of weeks and it's, hey, Jeannie, welcome back. I have this cookie for you. Mm-hmm. Those are the moments that build loyalty. There's a gazillion DoubleTrees you could go stay at.
Yeah, it's so, so true. And I think the other thing that we know is that people want to feel remembered and acknowledged and all those things. And there are so many ways that I think AI and automation could help people like remember other people, right? Like it's so, when the birthday example, right? Like knowing that it's your birthday and somebody saying that, that's meaningful, even if the machine told them to say that. So
it's only some of us who know behind the curtain.
Right, exactly. And it's still fun, to hear that. So I get it. Okay, so we've got another airline one. I guess there's a theme here. This one's a little different, but I've noticed, I'm sure you've noticed, that it used to be a lot easier to get to the airport and just check in and get on with your day. You could do that with less time. I feel like the more experienced of a traveler I've become, the more paranoid I've become about the time, because you've seen things go wrong in all these different ways, right? So it used to be that you could literally walk in and kind of approach the gate, and as long as you were like 10 minutes before, you could get on the plane. But now they're asking you to board earlier and earlier and earlier. And so it was kind of becoming 30 minutes was the standard. United actually just announced in June this year that they were going to 45 minutes. And what struck me about this was they're extending the kind of time. They're extending the time in the airport. They're extending the time on the plane. And some of this was in reaction to what they're calling a viral kind of TikTok trend. I had never heard of it because apparently I'm 100 years old. But the whole idea of you have 20 minutes basically in the airport when you get there and you get straight to your flight. Now, I love that idea. And I used to be one of those travelers who did not, especially at my home airport, I had this game I would play where I'm like, I'm not going to sit down. I'm going to give myself just enough time where I'm going to get through security, and then I'm going to get to the gate, and then it will be almost time to board, right? Like that was my game. But then you start seeing things. You see like, oh my gosh, why is TSA pre out the door this random Tuesday? Or why did they pull me aside 4 times as the random security check, right? Like there's always something. So now that they're asking people to kind of get there earlier and earlier, I'm just wondering, like, what impact will this have on the experience? How will people actually feel about the journey of flying if we start getting them earlier and earlier to the airport? Is that going to have a negative impact, or what do you think?
I really think it just depends on the traveler. And I will say my kind of thoughts around it are influenced by some research that we conducted maybe about 2 years ago, and really kind of identified traveler personas, so you can kind of see which person needs to be there earlier, which person is probably like that TikTok trend, cutting it to the very last moment. I'm kind of I'm a person who finds himself in routines. So I'll be like, I'm usually at the gate probably an hour before boarding. I don't like being rushed. I don't like being stressed, especially if I'm going to miss my flight, because then, as you're talking at the beginning, like that can turn into a whole, now you have to connect, or now you have to do this. When I first read this article, I kind of, again, chuckle with anything that the airlines put out, because there's so many rules and regulations and legalese that, as you and I were talking about in another project recently, it just becomes wallpaper, so no one reads it. So I'm like, you can tweet and text that all day long, but people are still probably going to show up when they think they should show up.
Yep.
I don't know. If anything, I think encouraging people to get there earlier will put them at greater ease, because you don't have to worry about the surprise TSA pre-check line or a system going down. Maybe you have time to grab a drink and sit down before you get on your plane. But them putting out a press release, I'd be shocked if I didn't know about it till you sent it to me. And I fly them almost every other week. So
there you go. They're probably like, wait a minute, we know you're on our list.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, and we say this all the time, like people don't read anymore. They just don't. And so we have to find different ways to communicate. If we really want them to care about what we're saying to customers, we have to find different ways to communicate, and communicate in a way that's like striking the balance so that it's often enough where they're going to see it, but it's not overkill where then they're going to never want to hear from us again. But I agree. I think this was more about, I always feel like maybe I'm cynical, but I'm like, is this because they want more on time, or like, is this about them more than the customer? And the other thing I wonder about though is people don't like sitting on planes on the ground. That's like, I'm never claustrophobic, except the minute we land that plane, like I want out of that plane. And I think I'm not alone. Like, I think people just, that feeling. So I do wonder if we're extending the boarding time and getting people on board earlier, is that actually making people kind of antsier throughout the flight or all those things? So I don't know if I have any answers here, except I think you bring up a really good point about the messaging. Like who are we really messaging when we send out a press release about this, and how are we really communicating this and really giving customers kind of the why behind it for them?
Like, what does this mean?
Yeah.
Like, what does this mean to your average customer? Okay. Because when you first read it, it almost seems like, so I have to be checked into the flight 45. Well, most people check in, I assume, I could be very wrong, but I'm assuming most people check in 24 hours in advance.
Right.
So it's like the why behind it, the what it means to you, or else it's just it's meaningless communication.
Yeah, exactly.
Save some of your marketing budget.
Right. Put in some, some, I don't know, better snacks or something in the planes. But yeah, that's, I think it's a really good point. And I think the other thing that I see all the time is that we don't necessarily think of people who are, like, some people love to read. Some people read everything. Some people will never read anything you send them. Some people love videos. Some people need to hear things and see things. Like, so when we're in the actual airports, the way they announce the gate, the boarding numbers. It's like if you don't have a visual and something that people can hear, you're wasting time. So it's just like maybe there's more to this than just giving people a time. Maybe it's really thinking about when is the right moment to give them the information they need, and how can we make that easier and more convenient for them so that they will follow the rules, because they won't feel like rules then. They'll just feel like this is what's in it for me. So
Exactly.
yeah. Well, this was fun. I'm so glad that you were able to join me after all these months of trying to schedule and everything. But is there anything that, if people want to reach out to you, if they want to learn more about you or Delaware North or anything you do, what's the best way for them to do that?
You can reach out to me via LinkedIn. I will say my LinkedIn isn't updated, but it's probably the easiest way to get in touch with me. So this is a good reminder that I need to go update my LinkedIn.
There you go. It's a good reminder for everybody. Keep your LinkedIn updated. You never know. You never know when you'll be invited to a podcast. So, exactly. Well, thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for the great discussion, and I'm sure we will be talking soon. And thank you to everybody here who listens, who watches Experience Action. We are so thrilled that you do. And don't forget, you can always leave me a voicemail at askjeannie.vip, and maybe I'll answer your question on the Experience Action podcast. Thanks for being here, everybody.